Welcome to Novara Live. I'm Michael Walker, and I'm joined tonight by Barry Malone. It's your first time in Novara Towers. You were very disappointed we don't have a makeup station.
I'm really sad because, as I said to you, I would have slathered that makeup on. So, I mean, apologies to the audience that I'm not made up, I hope.
It's something we're working on.
I'm not really bothered by that, but next time.
We've often talked about having an allowance for cosmetic surgery, but it's never got through the directors group. Coming up tonight, the Maccabi Tel Aviv row takes a new turn. As the Home Secretary says, she's lost confidence in West Midlands Police Chief. UK graduates have been hit by rising interest rates. Big nationwide row, I think, long overdue, about how student loans are screwing over younger generations, including myself. I'm not on this Plan 2 one, which is the really toxic one, but I am still paying 9% of my income on a student loan. Also, I spoke earlier today to the director of the Voice of Hind Rajab. That's a movie that will be out at the end of the week. Really, really powerful film. Got a 23-minute standing ovation at the Venice Film Festival. Also a very interesting interview. And finally, we will look at Mike Pompeo's eyebrow-raising statement on how historians should remember the war on Gaza. A spoiler, he said, they should not write about Palestinian victims. Just ignore them. As ever, if you'd like to support our work, you can sign up at novaramedia.com/support. The Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, has said she has lost confidence in the West Midlands top police officer. And it's all due to the decision made by West Midlands Police last year to ban fans from Maccabi Tel Aviv from attending a match last November against Aston Villa. Now, Maccabi Tel Aviv fans, in case you'd forgotten, are the ones who like to chant death to Arabs and, quote, "Why is there no school in Gaza? There are no children left there." That's a chant that they sing. Right? So we're having a big political row about this kind of person. Seems a little bit odd to me. I'm not sure why a failure to welcome them to Britain's second city is quite so controversial. But nonetheless, the row has led, for the first time in 2 decades, to a Home Secretary declaring no confidence in a police chief. This all follows a report by His Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary. He's called Sir Andy Cook. And this is what Mahmood said in Parliament today.
He shows that the police overstated the threat posed by the Maccabi Tel Aviv fans, while understating the risk that was posed to the Israeli fans if they travelled to the area. What is clear from this report is that on an issue of huge significance to the Jewish community in this country and to us all, we have witnessed a failure of leadership that has harmed the reputation and eroded public confidence in West Midlands Police and policing more broadly. Faced by a game of such importance, the Chief Constable of the force, Craig Guilford, should have ensured more professional and thorough work was done. The ultimate responsibility for the force's failure to discharge its duties on a matter of such national importance rests with the Chief Constable. And it is for that reason that I must declare today that the Chief Constable of West Midlands Police no longer has my confidence. It has been, as I understand it, over 20 years since a Home Secretary last made such a statement. But on the evidence provided by Sir Andy Cook, the Chief Inspector of Policing, that is now the case.
So as Shabana Mahmood said there, the report by Andy Cook did show some clear failings from the West Midlands Police in the processes leading up to their decision to ban Maccabi Tel Aviv fans, and in particular with how they explained that decision after the fact. But, important but, I think we could all do with having a little bit of perspective here. Right, so you heard Shabana Mahmood there saying this was a match of national importance, of such national importance that now it means that because there was, not all the I's were dotted and T's were crossed in a report about banning it, for the first time in 20 years, a police chief is being told to resign, right? Is deciding to hold a match behind closed doors because a bunch of foreign anti-Muslim fans were about to descend on the British city with the highest number of Muslims really the worst thing any police force has done in the last 20 years? Right, that's what we're being led to believe. That's the implication here. For the first time in 20 years, I am calling, or a Home Secretary is calling for a police chief to resign. And this is all because the West Midlands Police didn't want a bunch of racist football fans descending on their city. I find this slightly difficult to accept. We're going to be talking about this for a while. Let's first, though, take a step back and remind you of the basic details here. So the decision to ban Maccabi Tel Aviv fans came after a game months earlier, so earlier last year. It was in Amsterdam, so it's Maccabi Tel Aviv versus Ajax, and it led to widespread violence. So this is from a Channel 4 news report from the time.
Amsterdam had been bracing for violence ahead of the match, but when it came, its scale and nature were shocking. Police said men on scooters hunted down Israeli football supporters to beat them. One person kicked while prone, apparently unconscious.
This for the children! For the children!
This man forced to say, "Free Palestine."
Free Palestine now! Free Palestine!
Say free Palestine and we go.
As was another from the middle of a river.
Free Palestine!
Good.
This man telling his attacker, "I'm not Jewish," and beaten anyway. The violence followed 36 hours of tension, much of it seemingly stoked by Maccabi Tel Aviv supporters. Police said some attacked a local taxi driver on Wednesday, damaging his vehicle, as well as ripping down and burning Palestinian flags. Yesterday, in the build-up to their match against Ajax, minor confrontations in Amsterdam's main square, then racist anti-Arab chants as they made their way to the stadium.
So I thought that Ajax Maccabi Tel Aviv match was early 2025. In fact, as you saw there, it was in November 2024. So a correction if I'd said something different before we showed that clip. The chant at the end there was "Let the IDF win, we will F the Arabs." And that wasn't just sung by a couple of people. That was, a huge swathe of Maccabi Tel Aviv fans going down some escalators in Amsterdam. Now, I've been reading lots about this today just to remind myself of the story, and it actually doesn't seem that complicated to me what happens. So as far as, I've gone through the Wikipedia and various reporting about it. What it sounds like happened to me. A bunch of football fans from a country committing genocide against Arabs descended on a city with a large Arab population. The ultras from that football team went around the city chanting anti-Arab slogans, including about killing Arab children. Then parts of the Arab community in that city responded with violence, and it did include, at times, anti-Semitic and racist violence. Right, so ultimately, clearly violence and racism on both sides, clearly people who should have been arrested on both sides and condemned on both sides. However, the conclusion from this, for me, is that it seems perfectly reasonable that the West Midlands Police wanted to avoid the risk of that happening here, right? Whoever you think was ultimately at fault there, and it was clearly there was people on both sides at fault there. The thing that precipitated it was a bunch of Israeli fans descending on a city and chanting "death to Arabs" and joking about killing Gazan children. So for me, if you're a metropolitan police force, especially in a city with a large Muslim population, asking them not to come seems like a bit of a no-brainer to me. And indeed, that very same month, so the month that West Midlands Police so controversially banned Maccabi Tel Aviv fans from coming to a match, Israeli police in that same month cancelled a match between Maccabi Tel Aviv and Hapoel Tel Aviv after violent riots. So the idea this is just a completely peaceful bunch of football fans who have been smeared by sectarian Muslims, which is basically the claim being made by the right here. This is a football team with fans so violent that a derby in Tel Aviv was cancelled by Israeli police. Now, I don't know if maybe that makes the Israeli police anti-Semitic. I'm not sure. That's what we'd be led to believe if this happened here. Again, as far as I know, that decision did not lead to any police chiefs in Tel Aviv being pressured to resign. So what has led to the calls for the West Midlands Police Chief to stand down? Well, this is the report from the Chief Inspector of Constabulary, which Mahmoud was responding to today. And it does find that there were some significant errors in the document that West Midlands Police provided to Birmingham City Council's Strategic Advisory Group, which led to the Maccabi Tel Aviv fan ban. So just again, another step back. So when they're deciding whether to let this football match go ahead or whether to allow the away fans to come, you have the police put together a report, which they then give to this safety advisory group, which has some councillors, some police people, sort of various decision makers. And then together they make a decision, is this going to go ahead? And in this report, he has found that in the report given by the police to that safety advisory group, some of it doesn't actually stand up that well. So I'll show you some of them. It's quite a long report. I'm just going to show you some of them so you can get a sense of what these errors were. So this is quoting from the report. These inaccuracies included the following. So 1, the most recent match Maccabi Tel Aviv fan played in the UK was against West Ham United in the UEFA Europa Conference League group stage on 9th of November 2023. So that's a quote from the report by the police, and then it's sort of being fact-checked, I suppose, by the chief inspector. And he says, as has been widely reported, there was no such fixture. When we spoke to the Chief Constable of West Midlands Police, he told us that the force didn't use artificial intelligence tools in the preparation of the Safety Advisory Group report. During his appearance at the Home Affairs Select Committee on the 6th of January 2026, he confirmed this point. However, we heard contradictory evidence from a different WMP, West Midlands Police interviewee. This interviewee told us in clear terms that the erroneous statement was the result of a search the force carried out using Microsoft Copilot. This search tool uses AI. The interviewee described the error as an AI hallucination. Now, obviously, this is indefensible. If you are writing a safety report and you're a police force and you're writing it to this advisory group who's going to make a fairly significant decision, you shouldn't be using AI. And if you do use AI, you better damn well check the results. And it's not particularly difficult to search whether or not Maccabi Tel Aviv did in fact play West Ham United in the UEFA Europa Conference. This is not one of those things where it's a grey area. Maybe it's true under some interpretations. It didn't happen. It's made up. And this should be embarrassing for the West Midlands Police Force. Now, is it the worst thing the police have done anywhere in the UK in 20 years? Which seems to be the implication of how we're talking about this in our national conversation. Again, I'm not quite convinced, but clearly a blooper, that one. Let's go on to the next problem, which the inspector found, or the inspectorate found. So this is the quote that the West Midlands Police put in their report. So they said the police response saw 5,000 officers deployed over a number of days. And then Sir Andy Cook has sort of fact-checked this and said, we have found no evidence to substantiate this statement, which was about the number of officers deployed in the Netherlands at the November 2024 Ajax versus Maccabi Tel Aviv fixture. According to West Midlands Police records, Dutch police commanders briefed the force that approximately 2,000 officers had been deployed at that fixture. The same Dutch police commanders told our inspectors that they had deployed 1,200 officers. They also told us that in their briefing to WMP, they said they understood that 5,000 officers had been deployed in Paris for an Israeli national team fixture. So again, this is an error. West Midlands Police suggested that the Dutch police, there were 5,000 officers deployed to police the Maccabi Tel Aviv versus Ajax game. In fact, it seems like there was some confusion, intentional or otherwise, and in fact, the 5,000 figure refers to the number of officers who were deployed in Paris for an Israeli national team fixture. Again, an error. Doesn't, again, seem to me like the worst error that's been made in 20 years of British policing, but there we are. Let's go on to number 4. I'm not reading you all of these, I've just sort of selected some of them. So this one says, the day before the Ajax fixture saw approximately 500 to 600 Maccabi fans apparently intentionally targeting Muslim communities. Again, that's the quote from the West Midlands Police. And then this is Andy Cook's assessment of whether or not that was accurate. So Andy Cook says, there is evidence that Maccabi Tel Aviv fans targeted Muslims and pro-Palestinians, but they targeted individuals rather than residential communities. The Dutch police told us that Amsterdam's Muslim residential communities are generally outside the city centre and that there was no significant disorder outside the city centre. Now, this bit to me seems a little bit ridiculous. So it's nitpicking. So the West Midlands Police said Maccabi Tel Aviv fans attacked Muslim communities. And then Sir Andy Cook has said, well, they might have attacked Muslims, but the Muslim communities are actually outside of the centre. So that's inaccurate. Now, to me, this is far less convincing. I think kind of including this does a little bit to discredit it. But there we are. The final one I'm going to read for you here. This is one where there clearly was a big error in the West Midlands report. So the West Midlands report said the 500 to 600 Maccabi fans throwing innocent members of the public into the river. And Andy Cook said, this is inaccurate. The Dutch police told us that one Maccabi Tel Aviv supporter was thrown into a canal, apparently by a member of a pro-Palestinian group. The official Dutch reports, which were assessed by West Midlands police, confirm this. So this appearing in the report, that doesn't, I think the previous one I read to you seemed tenuous. Say that, no, he wasn't attacking, they weren't attacking Muslim communities, they were attacking Muslim individuals. But this one, if you said that the Maccabi Tel Aviv supporters had thrown someone into the river, and in fact it was a Maccabi Tel Aviv supporter who was thrown in the river. Again, significant error. And this is the last thing I'll read you from the report, which is what Sir Andy Cook concluded when it came to the errors he says he's identified in this report. He says, I have concluded that West Midlands police overstated the extent to which the disorder at that fixture was attributable to the Maccabi Tel Aviv supporters. All of this leads me to conclude that confirmation bias in relation to the behaviour of the Maccabi Tel Aviv fans played a part in the way West Midlands police reached its preferred tactical option and the strength with which it presented it to the safety advisory group. Now that to me actually seems fair enough as a conclusion. So what he's suggesting is that the West Midlands police had made a decision that they didn't want this match to go ahead. And so when they were preparing this report for the safety advisory group, they, when they saw a fact that they thought would help persuade the group of their position, they put it in. And when they saw a fact that might not help their position, they didn't put it in. And then where they had made errors, they all seemed to be in one direction, which is that they didn't want this match to happen. That to me seems... I kind of agree with that, actually, from having read the report. That seems like a reasonable conclusion. However, given that I think most reasonable people would say the match shouldn't have happened anyway, are a few errors in a report, the AI one being very embarrassing, is this enough to justify, for the first time in 20 years, saying a police chief must resign?
No.
Expand, Barry.
Yes, they made errors in the report, but you're absolutely right. They're nitpicks. They're quibbles. Okay, there weren't 5,000 police. There were 2,000 police. I do think that the AI one is, as you say, mortifying. Kids don't use AI to do research, and if you do, make sure that you check it afterwards. But they're quibbles, they're nitpicks. What they don't do is take away from the fact that the police made a decision not to allow a group of racist, violent football hooligans attend a fixture in which there was very reasonable cause to believe that they would cause trouble for the local community, cause trouble in a Muslim community. And there's ample evidence there, even when you take out these things that are, the messy aspects to the report. You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of when somebody commits a crime and they get off because the police officer recorded something wrong in his notebook, right? But they actually did commit the crime. So what we're being sort of asked to believe here is that because there are a few mistakes in the way that they produce their reports and their documentations, they made the wrong decision. They did not make the wrong decision. It was clearly the correct decision. Like you said, they say death to the Arabs, F the Arabs, the appalling chant about there are no schools in Gaza because there are no children in Gaza. And this happened again just last month, by the way. Maccabi Tel Aviv fans were in Stuttgart for a fixture in December, and they repeated that chant. 7 of them were arrested outside the stadium, and they're currently being investigated by German police. But we're being told by the political and media establishment in this country that the West Midlands police made that decision because of anti-Semitism. By the way, the report doesn't say that, does it? It doesn't say that they were banned because they were Jewish. It doesn't conclude that they were banned out of anti-Semitism. It doesn't conclude that they were banned because they were Israeli. But yet, that is what's going to be reported. And that is what the political and media establishment are going to say. And that is ultimately what's going to put pressure on the chief constable to resign.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that I still find so frustrating is that Shabana Mahmood sort of speech, speaking to Parliament, where she said, because this was a match of such national importance. It was the Europa League, Aston Villa versus Maccabi Tel Aviv. Like, that is not a match of national importance. Who gives a damn?
You know, I know we have to talk about it today because of what's happened, but I think I tweeted like a week or two ago, I cannot believe we're still talking about this. You know, because you're right, it was a Europa League football match.
It's not even the Champions League. Like, maybe if it was the Champions League, this is a big deal. But it's like you get into that by coming like fifth. I don't even know the point in winning it, because if you win the Europa League, all you've proved is that you're Europe's best mediocre team.
Not even
like,
that, just the fact that it's a football match. It's a football match. There's
Yeah.
a genocide going on, and we're talking about a football match.
Very true. So why are we talking about it? This is what we're going to get onto next. Why has this become such a national story, given the fact that actually it's also the case that the idea of banning sort of foreign football fans from attending a match because they've been known to be racist in the past, that happens quite a lot. Like, it's kind of standard when it comes to UEFA. So the fact this is a national story is bizarre. So why is that the case? Well, last week at a Home Affairs Select Committee hearing into the decisions made sort of in the process of banning Maccabi Tel Aviv, the MPs taking part in that Home Affairs Select Committee declared these interests.
Can I welcome our first panel today to our follow-up session following the session we held at the beginning of December on the policing of the Aston Villa Maccabi Tel Aviv football game. Before we start, if members of the committee could declare any relevant interests, and I will declare that I am a member and officer of Conservative Friends of Israel.
I'm a member of Labour Friends of Israel, Labour Friends of Palestine, but I'm also, for 40 years, the spouse of Lord Mann, who's the government's independent, unpaid advisor on anti-Semitism.
And I'm the all-party parliamentary group chair against anti-Semitism. Sorry, the chair of the all-party parliamentary group against anti-Semitism.
I'm a member of Labour Friends of Israel. I travelled with Labour Friends of Israel to Israel in May of last year. I also attempted to travel to Israel with the Centre for the Advancement of Arab-British Understanding, and was banned from entry into Israel later in the year. So I've been twice, but only got in once. I'm also a member of the Board of Deputies of British Jews.
And I received a donation from the Lib Dem Friends of Israel before the last election.
Thank you very much.
So the chair of the Home Affairs Select Committee is an officer for the Conservative Friends of Israel. Another MP taking part is the wife of John Mann. So John Mann, we've talked about him before, is the ex-Labour MP. He left Labour to shout at Jeremy Corbyn from the sidelines, and then was rewarded by the Tories to become their anti-Semitism advisor, which basically consisted of telling the Tories why pro-Palestine protesters are racist, essentially. That was the job. Then there's a Labour friend of Israel who travelled to Israel during the genocide, and a recipient of a donation from the Lib Dems Friends of Israel. Right? Could none of them just have been friends of the people of Birmingham who don't want a bunch of anti-Arab hooligans coming over from Israel to pull down Palestine flags and provoke inter-ethnic conflict? Right? Maybe it would have been more useful for members of that group to be in the select committee discussing why this ban was made. But this is kind of crazy.
It's absurd. It's an insane clip. And wow, what an impartial committee that was. But it's a beautiful little minute-long illustration of the grip that this country is in from the Israeli lobby. I mean, there it is. There it is in a minute. I don't know how many people were sitting around that table. Was it 8? Was there 6 of them who had pro-Israel interests there? 6 out of 8, something like that. It was certainly the majority. And again, it illustrates why we're talking about this today. It illustrates why we're talking about this Europa League football match. It's because of the Israeli lobby. Otherwise, this would never be, as you say, absurdly, a national issue. We wouldn't have, for the first time in 20 years, a Home Secretary calling for a police chief constable to resign. And, by the way, talking today about how they were going to change powers to give the Home Secretary the power to directly dismiss chief constables, something that I think was done away with in this country in 2011. So great, because of the Israel lobby, because of an Israeli group of anti-Arab football hooligans, we're going to introduce legislation to my mind, politicize policing. Wonderful.
There's so much legislation we have to change because people are mean to Israelis. So one of the biggest drivers of new legislation over the past 5 years or so. British graduates are getting screwed. with tens of thousands in debt and paying punishing interest rates, the student loan system is clearly not working, and the mainstream media is waking up.
This chart we've got now shows the difference between annual loan repayments made by students and the amount of interest added to those loans each year. So essentially, this is a kind of snapshot of the progress students are making on paying down their debt each year. The amount that they've paid off in blue and the amount of interest that they've been seen added to their loan balance in red. Well, in the period to 2016-17, we saw these change quite significantly because in 2012, there was a new repayment plan called Plan 2 that was brought in. This was brought in to coincide with tuition fees going up to £9,000. And Plan 2 said that students had to repay their loan at an interest rate of inflation plus 3%. So these first new repayment plans came in for students in 2016-17. Let's zoom out and see what has happened to this balance since then. And you will see that the amount of interest added to student loan balances each year relative to the amount they are paying down has absolutely soared, trapping students from the period of 2012 to 2023 who were on this special repayment plan in their student loans. Clearly, way more being added to how much they owe than how much they're able to pay off each year.
That's a really crazy chart. So last year, for people on these loans, £15 billion was added in interest while only £5 billion was paid off, which is crazy. This terrible deal is specifically for people who started university between 2012 and 2023. So they were the cohort, or the first cohort to pay £9,000 a year. And the interest rates they're paying is crazy. So it's RPI inflation, which is already the higher form of inflation, plus up to 3%, depending on how much you earn. So that's the Plan 2 people. Now, for comparison, I was the cohort just before that. So my fees were £3,000. The interest on my debt is capped at RPI inflation. I still owe £22,000. I checked yesterday while I was looking at this story. 15 years on, which is more than the £18,000 I would have taken out in total. But I can't complain. Apparently, some people have it worse. If I was 3 years younger, I would owe even more. Oliver Gardner from the campaign group Rethink Repayment said this to the Times newspaper. High interest rates on student loan balances mean that many graduates feel they will never realistically pay them off. They will be burdened with much higher marginal tax rates for most of their working lives, even after they have paid back the principal of the loan. Now, that point about marginal tax rates is the important thing to understand, because the good thing about student loans in the UK compared to, say, the United States is they can't make you bankrupt, right? You only pay them back if you are earning. But the issue is that the marginal rate at 9% is very high. So that means that on every pound above the threshold, you pay 9p, an extra 9p in tax. And this is a bigger problem because the point at which it kicks in, the threshold, has been repeatedly frozen. And it's now reached the point that by 2030, graduates will be paying an extra 9% tax on anything they earn above the minimum wage. So I was always, when I took out the loan, I always thought, well, when I'm earning that much money, it won't matter if I'm paying 9%, but it's now going to be, it's converging with the minimum wage. And just let that sink in. So an extra 9% tax on everything above minimum wage. That's huge. Now, imagine if Rachel Reeves announced that income tax was going to be raised by 9p in the pound for everyone. Just like, okay, we're going to have a 9p raise to income tax. There would be absolute uproar, right? The right-wing press would howl that work no longer paid and that people will stop doing overtime. No one's going to try get promoted. Productivity is going to collapse. We'd also have economists warning that by sucking all that money out of the economy, this would push us into recession. It's an incredibly contractionary thing to do, to increase income tax by 9%. But for any graduate under the age of around 37, so that's the first cohort to pay £3,000 a year, that's already the reality.
I graduated 6 years ago, and when I graduated, I had just shy of £43,000 of debt, and I checked yesterday and I've now got £57,000. I'm paying a few £100s a month towards mine, but I checked last financial year I paid over £4,000 in debt, in interest. So the amount I owe is just going up and up and up.
So you're paying hundreds of pounds a month And your loan is going up.
Yeah, it's the only loan in the world. Like if you had a loan with the bank and you paid it off, obviously the amount you owe would decrease. And as it currently stands, I'll still be paying this debt by the time I'm in my 50s, which is absolutely insane. Because
Would you have still gone to university if you'd known that you'd have this debt? Would you have done anything different?
No, I think I would have explored other avenues. But in my school, certainly, they said, you won't really notice the repayments. It's just the way the system works.
Times article that we quoted from earlier, graduates need to be earning about £66,000 before they start actually tackling the debt and not just the interest. So anyone on this plan 2 who is earning below £66,000, their interest payments are more than what they're paying down their principal. The lady there suggested that people might stop going to university because of this. Should they?
I mean, look, there are lots of other ways that you can become successful without going to university, right? Which is why I'm a big advocate for university degrees not being a prerequisite for jobs in which they're not necessarily relevant, right? Which we still see happening. But people should not be unable to go to university because they're going to get themselves into tens and tens of thousands of pounds of debt. And so, I think as that interviewee said, this could become an issue of social mobility. I think it is an issue of social mobility. And as we know, social mobility is a huge challenge in this country and has been getting worse for years. I was looking today at a 2023 report from the Institute of Fiscal Studies, which said that when that report was done in 2023, social mobility was at its lowest in 50 years in the UK. Now, I'm not saying that that abolishing tuition fees solves everything, right? Because I said that in Ireland, we abolished tuition fees in 1996. There have been studies done that showed that it wasn't like a panacea, right? Because there are still problems at the secondary level when it comes to people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds getting the results that they need to get into university. But God, it would help if there were no tuition fees. And, I think we all remember that in 2020, Keir Starmer actually pledged to abolish tuition fees. I don't think the Keir Starmer of today would be quite so keen to do that. But something needs to be done. Something needs to be changed because this is a huge problem. And I think the Sky clip has gone viral. And, I hope that people keep talking about this and the media keeps talking about this because it actually seems to me like kind of an emergency, right? And the way to, look, let's not criticize young people and students for eating avocado toast. Like, let's stop taxing education.
Yeah. The universities actually, I think, don't want free education because then they're worried that if it's directly funded by the government, they're not going to be as well funded as they currently are. But then there is a whole argument that maybe we don't need these universities, which are super competitive and can compete with Harvard. And actually we want them just to be normal teaching institutions. I want to get up a timeline of UK tuition fees because it's, I suppose, interesting how quickly it's changed. So in 1998, Labour introduced means-tested fees of £1,000 per year. So before that, it was free. 2004, the Higher Education Act permitted universities to charge up to £3,000, and that began in 2006. So that's the one I'm paying. And then in 2012, fees were raised to £9,000. So that's the one I was protesting against. And then I suppose an important thing to note is that the Plan 2 people, they have this really shitty deal when it comes to interest, but their debt will get wiped after 30 years. So it's 30 years of paying an extra 9% income tax. They've changed it now. So I think they're called Plan 5 now. The people who start university after 2023, their interest rates are going to be a bit more capped, which is good. But the bad for them is that they're going to have to keep paying them for 40 years. So theirs won't get wiped out until they're pretty much a pensioner. So that's an extra 9% tax for the rest of their lives. Just some alternatives where in Scotland, Ireland, you're saying lots of Europe universities is free or low cost. The United States, the worst model, you take out private loans, which can make you bankrupt. Australia seems to be the most similar to ours, but again, they don't charge interest on the loan at all. So people are a bit less pissed off about it there. I'm sure if you meet an Australian, they're also somewhat pissed off about it. Hind Rajab was a 5-year-old Palestinian girl in the Gaza Strip who was killed by Israeli forces on the 29th of January 2024. Rajab and her family were fleeing Gaza City when their vehicle was shelled. killing her uncle, aunt, and 3 cousins. Now, of course, Israeli forces killing entire families is not remotely exceptional in Gaza. Neither is the brutal killing of children. According to the Red Cross, Israel has killed over 20,000 children in the Strip over the past 2 years or so. What made Hind Rajab's death different, though, is that the horrific circumstances of her killing were recorded on tape. That's because in the run-up to her death, in the hours leading up to her death, she was on the phone to the Palestinian rescuers trying to save her. And those recordings form the central part of a new feature film called The Voice of Hind Rajab.
لكن تضغطي وما ما تنزفيش يعني حاولي انك تسكري الجرم.
تمام السيارة جاية.
الو طوارئ الهلال الاحمر رام الله الضفه الغربيه عمر معك تفضل. الو شو اسمك انت؟
كل دم أمام بيتي ماما غيرت حالي.
مهدي احتمال احتاج سيارة إسعاف.
عمر حبيبي احنا مجبرين نأمن له مسلك آمن.
إذا ما فيش معها وقت.
شايف هدول يا شاب؟ خسرناهم كلهم.
8 دقايق ممكن تكلفهم حياتهم إذا ما عملناش التنسيق وعمارة.
They are shooting at a car with a little girl inside. Can you imagine that? So do something. انت في التمهيدي؟ هند انا جايين ناخدك احنا.
كل دم أمام بيتي أنا بكون محزونة عايزة بس لسه في فضا لسه معنا وقت.
So as you saw there in the trailer, the film combines the fictional reconstruction of the drama in the operating centre of the Palestinian Red Crescent, played by actors, with the real live audio of Hind Rajab making her final call. It's powerful and heartbreaking. It's been incredibly well received. The film received a 23-minute standing ovation when it was shown at last year's Venice Film Festival. It also won the jury prize there. It's out this Friday in cinemas across the UK. And earlier today, I spoke to its director, Kaouther Ben Hania. And I began by asking why she decided to make this particular movie.
It wasn't really a decision. Actually, it was an encounter, I would say. When I heard the voice of Hind Rajab for the first time, it was on social media and it was all over internet. And what I felt at this moment, hearing this child begging for life, I was so sad, so angry, and I felt in a way helpless, and I hate it when I feel helpless. And automatically I asked myself, what can I do? I am a filmmaker, so maybe I can do a movie. So it was, because I had this very, very strong emotion that I wanted to share with the audience in a way, but in between, between the first encounter and the impulsive decision to make a movie and sharing this emotion with the audience, in the middle you have all the rational, creative decision about doing this movie.
I suppose the decisions made in how to portray this story were quite interesting because you've got the real life recording of Hind Rajab speaking to the Palestine Red Crescent. I mean, a call which went on for such a long time, such a horrific situation. And then you have, I suppose, a fictionalized account performed by actors of the people who were receiving that call in the Palestine Red Crescent office. I suppose what's not clear from watching the movie is to what extent is what's going on in the call centre true to life, or is there is it a fictionalized version where you're using your artistic license, or did you sort of speak to the people working there and you're trying to portray what actually happened in the call centre?
When I heard her voice, it was a small extract on the internet. So I reached out to the Red Crescent. So they asking them to share with me all the recording, because they recorded everything, all the conversation of that day, starting with the killing of the cousin, Layan, the 15-year-old, then all the conversation with Hind, and then the bombing of the ambulance who went to save Hind. So they sent me those 70 minutes of recording, and when I make the choice to tell the story from the point of view of those who listened to the Voice of Hind Rajab, I needed to know what happened around the recording. So I talked a lot with the first responder, the dispatcher, Omar, Rana, Nisreen, Mahdi, and they shared with me what happened that day in the office, and I tried to be accurate, because I had this document where you have almost everything, and I needed, to draw a screenplay, but coming from their testimony. So I wrote the first draft, I sent it back to them to have feedback, and we did. They were a great partner in this movie. So this is how we worked together. I would say, I tried to be very, very close to what they told me, and then I had the recording, which was, said by the actor word by word as it is in the recording.
I hadn't realised that. That's really sort of important context, and that does sound like it is really true to life. And I suppose one of the tensions within the call centre, having watched it, is, I mean, there's so many things that are tragic about the story, but what's frustrating, I suppose, about the story is that for the hours that Hind Rajab is alone, well, she's not alone because she's with dead family members, but the only surviving person in the car, the Palestine Red Crescent ambulance is only an 8 minutes drive away. But they aren't able to begin that 8 minutes drive until they've got some kind of coordination or agreement with the International Red Cross and with the Israeli military, for obvious reasons, because the Israelis bomb ambulances quite a lot, so they wanted to say we've guaranteed that this is a site of safe passage, and that takes a very long time. Obviously, as you've said, ultimately that ambulance does get bombed and the people in it get killed. But what I want you to talk about is that tension within the call centre for the Palestine Red Crescent, sort of between people saying, look, why are we waiting for the Israelis to give us permission to go and rescue this girl? And other people saying, look, if we go and try and rescue Hind Rajab without first having some kind of coordination with the Israelis, then all that's going to happen is we're going to lose lots more first responders who have their own families, and also once the first responders are killed, they can't help anyone else. So speaking to people working for the Palestine Red Crescent, was that a tension that they talked about?
Yeah, because they work under an impossible situation. You have those rules imposed by the occupation. You can think about it as bureaucracy, but it's not. It's bureaucracy by design to make their life impossible. And ultimately, it made the life of this little girl impossible in a very literal way. So we often say, and it's not the only example, because people think that Palestinians are divided. And this is something used by the Israelis to say, look how they are divided, But since they live under pressure, under the domination of the occupation, imposing them rules, they have this kind of tension. They don't trust, the army. The same army that killed the Hameda family and was shooting this car where you have this little girl, is asked to give them a safe route to their ambulance. And they, the position of Mahdi is very understandable because he lost a lot of colleagues killed by the Israeli army. And he say in the movie, if there is another colleague added to this list, I resign. And this is what did the real Mahdi actually in real life. After, the death of his colleague and Hind Rajab, he resigned because it's impossible, to work in this with this, weight of choice, sending your colleague to death and doing everything to avoid death, but they are being killed anyway, like the Israeli army, they designed all those rules, but they don't respect them. It's like, a very, very beyond cruelty situation.
I know you've had a relationship with Hind Rajab, and you spoke to her sort of while you were making this movie. I wonder if you could speak about that relationship. I'm not sure if Hind Rajab's mother has watched this. I imagine that would be a very traumatic experience in itself. But yeah, could you talk about that relationship and what you've been told by Hind Rajab's mother, let's say?
The first thing I did it was to call Hind Rajab mother because I couldn't do this movie without not only her approval but also her blessing. So we had this conversation, and Hind Rajab mother, Wissam, her name, is really she's resilience in person. And she told me from the beginning, my child is not the only child that was killed in Gaza in very difficult way. And what I want really is justice for my daughter. So if this movie can help in a way, please do it. And when I finished the movie, I wanted to show her the movie and she told me, no, I can't, which is understandable, it's too early. I can't even hear the voice of my daughter, which is all over internet. But if you want my feedback, you can show the movie to my brother. She have a very close brother. She trusted him, and he watched the movie, and they talked about it. And she is behind the movie. I mean, we see her at the end of the movie. She's part of the end of the movie.
And could you talk about how this movie has been received, and I suppose issues when it comes to distribution? Obviously, this has had sort of a very good reception. That 23-minute standing ovation at Venice Film Festival, it won the Grand Jury Prize at Venice. We've seen, though, from recent history that critical acclaim doesn't necessarily mean a film won't have any problems when it comes to distribution. So the Oscar-winning documentary No Other Land, which struggled to get an American distributor, being here the most high-profile example. I wonder if you could talk about your experience of getting this movie, I suppose, through the industry, especially in the United States.
Yeah, from the beginning, my purpose, me and my team, was to echo the voice of this little girl and to make her voice resonate beyond border, especially in the United States. I didn't want only the people who are interested in this matter to watch the movie, but regular American. So when we had this incredible reception at Venice Film Festival, when we had the jury award at Venice Film Festival, we thought that we can have, a big American distributor to honor, the voice of this little girl and to show it everywhere. It wasn't the case. It was a fight, and finally we decided that to go with Willa Distribution, which is one of our executive producer. They are doing great job. It's not like the huge distribution that I dreamt of, but I knew that it will be a fight, because it's a movie where people prefer not to hear this voice in a way, to look away. And I wanted them to sit and to remember and to hear and to, maybe do something about it.
And do you feel like, I mean, it's difficult to judge, isn't it? But you sort of said at the start, the reason you made this movie is because you didn't want to feel impotent. You wanted to do something proactive to try and win justice for Palestinian people, for Hind Rajab. Do you feel in any way, I mean, obviously you couldn't have hoped for a film that was more successful, more powerful than this. Do you feel like in some way you have achieved that goal?
Yes, in some way, but it's still, I mean, the reception is great. I did so many screening with Q&A, and it was a packed house, and the movie is distributed almost all over the world. So, yeah, I think it's a big achievement for this kind of movie.
We have some breaking news, which is that Reuters is reporting, so the Reuters news agency is reporting that Donald Trump has decided he's going to attack Iran in the next 24 hours. That story, they say, is based on some Western officials. And then also the BBC has a story about how the US has been withdrawing its troops from Qatar. And the significance of that is that if there were to be an attack on Iran, a possible retaliatory strike by Iran could be against American military bases in Qatar. So obviously, if you move out your military personnel from that base, there is less risk that any of them will get killed in any retaliatory strike. So lots of people, Barry, reading this as, yeah, this is it, right? There is going to be a US attack in the next 24 hours on Iran. That's from Western officials. And then this withdrawal from Qatar makes it seem likely. Do you think what's your read on this? Should we take these reports on their word?
Well, I think we had the report earlier today about the personnel being pulled out of the Al Udeid Air Base, which is the biggest US military base in the Middle East. And also, we should remember that is where Iran fired missiles at that base after the Israeli-US attack on the 12-day war last year. And now we have this reporting from Reuters. It cites 2 European officials and 1 Israeli official. So, it's convincing reporting from, a news agency that doesn't tend to get these things wrong and has very good sources in European governments and in the Israeli government. So for me, this Reuters report is the best indication we have that something may be about to happen. What is about to happen in terms of what the scope of the attack would be is completely unclear. And I think the Israeli official actually said that to Reuters. The official said that they appear to believe Trump has decided to intervene, but they don't know what the scope is going to be and when exactly it will happen. I think I had discussed with somebody else earlier as well that there are reports, and this is, accepting that the information coming out of Iran is very, very difficult to confirm. But there have been some convincing reports that the protests may be ebbing a little bit. So I think Trump's pretext, because it is a pretext, that he is going to attack Iran to help the protesters. I mean, the window for the pretext might be slightly closing, which could explain why he's moving to act quite quickly now, potentially.
Yeah, because obviously he'd said, if you shoot on the protesters, I will intervene and come to their defense. I mean, obviously the motivation for Donald Trump is not going to be to defend protesters, right? That's not why he does anything. But as you say, the pretense, that was it. But it does seem like the protests have subsided somewhat in Iran. Obviously, not because people are now suddenly super supportive of the regime, but it seems as if because the repression was quite effective. But as you say, it seems like maybe Donald Trump thinks the window of opportunity for invading, I don't know, will he be invading? I mean, what would the action look like? I mean, do you think Donald Trump wants to just take out the Ayatollah and the Islamic regime in Iran? Because, what would happen then? I suppose one thing these demonstrations definitely haven't demonstrated to me is that there is some kind of cohesive alternative force either within Iran or outside of Iran that looks in any way ready to replace the Islamic Republic.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they're invading. Iran has a massive sort of standing military, right? I think that the Revolutionary Guards numbers 120,000, 150,000, and then there are other parts of the military that are also have hundreds and hundreds of thousands of personnel. And so I think a ground invasion right now would be completely out of the equation. But it's interesting. There has been reporting that people in DC, whether they're people close to the administration or DC wonks, have started to talk about the Venezuela model, right? Which is how they see it now is the model of going in and chopping off the head of the snake, whether that's, abducting them or killing them, and then effectively using the remnants of that state as your sort of your client government, your puppet state. We don't even know, you said this to me earlier, whether or not that's worked in Venezuela yet, that you would go so far as to make it a model. But I think what they're ultimately trying to do, and I think what they've been trying to do, is to destabilize the Iranian government, to destabilize the Iranian state, because the Iranian government is actually quite good at hanging on when protests erupt. I think that this is the fifth sort of street uprising since 2009, and they've weathered all of them, and there are a lot of analysts who think that they will weather this one, that the only way that it can topple them is if the protests continue for a longer time, and if there are fractures within the political elite or the security forces. And we haven't, again, accepting the fact that it's really hard to confirm what's happening in Iran right now. We don't seem to have seen those fractures. So is Trump looking to destabilize the regime? Is Trump looking to chop the head off the snake? Again, I really don't think we know.
I mean, the fact that this has, maybe the people briefing this to Reuters are people who are leaking this, and Trump didn't want this told to the newspapers. When I see reports like this, I often think that someone in government has decided, okay, let's do some kite flying here. And if you wanted to, do what has been done in Venezuela and take out the Ayatollah, I don't know if you're going to be able to sort of land and arrest him and taking him alive, or maybe do what they did to Qasem Soleimani, which is just kill him. You wouldn't give 24 hours notice. So, if you give notice, it seems a bit more like one of those situations where they're going to do something a bit performative, like they just sort of take out a nuclear facility or some kind of military base, and then sort of say, okay, we've done that. Iran has paid a price. They'll think twice before they crack down on their protesters next time.
Yeah, perhaps. These reports are coming from European officials, not American ones. I don't know what the motivation for those officials might be in speaking to Reuters. I think more significant, if that is your theory, is the clear withdrawal of personnel from the base in Qatar, which Iran would know about. And it's not just US personnel, but it's UK personnel. I think that detail of some UK personnel being withdrawn makes it more plausible that an attack is imminent in the next 24 hours, because I'm not sure that the US and the UK would have cooperated on that kind of a smokescreen. I think that the UK would withdraw its personnel because it thinks that there's a good chance of something happening there.
And we are in a situation where Trump seems a bit high on his own supply, right? He's clearly looking at what happened in Venezuela and saying, look, since Iraq, there's been this precedent that you can't just sort of click your fingers and make regime change happen. But actually, Donald Trump, I can do that, right? I can do things other people couldn't. And other people say they don't like the Islamic Republic, but I'm a man of action. And just like I did in Venezuela, I'm going to take him out. Some people will get hurt, but not many people. No Americans will get hurt. And ultimately, we're going to completely reshape the world in our image.
Was that your Donald Trump impression?
I'm not very good at Donald. Ash and Aaron have a better Donald Trump than me, but that was...
Actually, I've seen Ash do a really good one, but that was okay.
It was okay. It was
6 out of 10. No, not 5. But no, I think you're right. I think he is massively high in his own supply. And I think that, for Trump, he, in Trump's mind, and I think in Marco Rubio's mind, and in Pete Hegseth's mind, and in Stephen Miller's mind, I think they all believe that Venezuela has been a massive success already. Again, notwithstanding the fact that we don't really know how this is going to play out over the next 6 months, how this is going to play out over the next year, I think they've seen that they've cowed almost the entirety of Europe with their threats around Greenland. He's tearing up the quote-unquote, because I hate this term, rules-based international order, for all that it ever existed for everybody in the first place. It's completely torn to pieces now. And I think Trump was always somewhat unpredictable. I think he's about to become even more unpredictable. And so something may very well happen if Reuters is correct, which they often are. But we just don't know what. And it's a fool's game to try to predict what the US administration is going to do right now.
Okay, that's a good place to end this segment before we veer into too much wild speculation. Obviously, we'll be keeping a close eye on this over the next 24 hours. And if something does happen, obviously the place to tune into is Novara Live tomorrow at 6 p.m. For now, Barry Malone, thank you so much for joining me this evening. It's been a pleasure having you here in person.
Good to be here.
Thank you guys for watching. We'll be back tomorrow at 6 p.m. Could be a pretty significant show. For now, you've been watching Novara Live. Good night.